that was fighting for gay rights, and people were killed.
Nobody was killed at Stonewall.
Nobody was killed.
Jaremi Carey is a very important part of the building blocks of the RuPaul's Drag Race franchise. If you're a longtime fan of my channel, then you know that 2 years ago, I made a video about Jaremi's drag career as Fifi O'Hara, exploring some aspects of her life that showed her past what we saw on television. It ended up getting a really good reception from people, with even Jaremi herself thanking everyone for the love, which was amazing. But that being said, the villain of Jaremi Carey was one of the first videos that I ever made. So upon recently rewatching it, I noticed not just how bad the audio quality was, but also my narration style wasn't where I wanted it to be. Therefore, I've decided to revisit this topic and create a much more higher quality and more complete video for you all. So get ready to embark on the journey of not just the best villain of RuPaul's Drag Race, but also from reality TV as a whole. Before we get started, this video is sponsored by Manscaped.com, the #1 go-to place for men's grooming products. Manscaped is trusted by over 10 million users worldwide for their trimmers, hygiene formulations, and premium boxers. What's more is that if you're looking for a gift for Father's Day, I have the perfect suggestions. This month, I want to introduce you to the Handyman and the Weed Whacker 2.0, a perfect gift for Father's Day, which is all year round. The Handyman is a compact electric razor that uses skin-safe technology, leaving you with a nice close shave. I've been using my Handyman for a couple months now, and honestly, it's really changed the way that I approach trimming my facial hair. What sets this shaver apart is the advanced dual blade equipped with a standard foil shaver as well as long hair levered blades. It can even help you knock down 3 days of growth. So say goodbye to that patchy beard and hello to a clean, well-groomed appearance. Now let's talk about the Weed Whacker 2.0 nose and ear hair trimmer. With a powerful 7,000 RPM motor and a 360-degree rotary dual blade system, the Weed Whacker 2.0 helps any man tackle unwanted hair like a pro. It also features a high-performance rechargeable battery that lasts up to 45 minutes of continuous use. And just like the Handyman, the Weed Whacker 2.0 is cordless and waterproof. So ditch the boring old coffee mug and get your loved one a product from Manscaped, and use code GREENGAY for a whole 20% off plus international free shipping. Take advantage of this great deal by clicking the link in the description. Now let's begin. If we're talking about making a TV show, there's so many things that we have to consider. There's making sure that each of the contestants have an equal playing field to display their talent, while also focusing on those individuals that have some really good storyline potential that would make them intriguing to the audience. So one of the classic ways to achieve this is to go to the old reliable hero versus villain narrative. Because A, everyone likes to root for an underdog, and B, they also love themselves a good villain. Why? Because most people like having that character on screen that whenever they appear, they just can't stand them, making you root even further for the contestant you do like, and celebrate when the person you don't like is doing bad on a certain challenge. But when we're talking about Jaremi Carey, or as you might know her, Fifi O'Hara, this simple formula for good TV would have a catastrophic backlash that has shaped her life in a way where to this day she still feels the effects. Season 4 is one of the golden seasons, especially since to this day many of the modern seasons can't hold a candle to it. In a sense, it has a lot of longevity, probably because of the amount of superstars within the cast too. Jaremi has said that season 4 of Drag Race was the one that put the series on the map, which is valid. I mean, that's the point where they centered in on what they wanted their final product to be in terms of the episodes, the challenges, or even just catchphrases that RuPaul would say. Yet why is it that despite playing a vital role in both season 4 and All Stars 2, Jaremi would go on to retire the drag character of Fifi O'Hara, cut ties with the show, and build her brand as a Twitch streamer that's actually been working out really well for her in the past couple years. So I recommend you go check her out if you're into gaming. On top of that, she's still actively diving into her creative style, using those skills that she strengthened throughout her drag to give us her adaptation of popular video game characters or anime protagonists. Like as of recently, she did her take on Patrick Star from SpongeBob, which went semi-viral on social media. The reason I mention this is because most of Jaremi's career has been nothing but amazing. Even during the height of her hate train, at least she was still making life-changing amounts of money as one of the few Drag Race girls to be able to even have the title of an all-star. Unfortunately, it's hard to ignore that along with the success of most of her career as a Ru girl, she also had a dark shadow that followed her, making certain time periods of her life really difficult to deal with. In the world of reality television, one of the main goals that production expects out of any given cast of a season is that each contestant is able to provide entertaining content, whether it be through funny confessionals, beautiful runways, traumatic life stories, or lip sync ability. This makes it easier for the editors of the show to create a concise storyline for each queen of the season. At this point, I know you guys aren't brand new. We all know that while in most cases the edit that the queens get does properly represent how they behaved in the competition, there's some cases where they go a little overboard with wanting to emphasize that one queen is the villain. In the same way, they sometimes emphasize a queen like Utica is kooky, or Sasha Colby being a mother. In theory, the process of editing is done with non-malicious intentions, because really they're just trying to piece together something with the material they're given to create a good final product. Although if you're one of the new queens entering the workroom doors, usually the last thing you'd want is for you to be the person that gave enough shady moments to production for them to emphasize you as the antagonist of the season. Yet in order to even be the villain of the season, you have to actually make it far to leave an impression on people. When the person we knew as Fifi O'Hara was in the process of getting cast on RuPaul's Drag Race Season 4, she was also very close to getting cast into another reality TV show called America's Got Talent, which was much more mainstream than Drag Race at the time. There's actually been many Ru girls to compete on America's Got Talent, some more notable than others like Kennedy Davenport, who performed a similar rendition of her All Stars 3 talent show during America's Got Talent Season 8, but she wouldn't go on to make it far. Another queen to compete on the show was Derek Barry, who was on Season 3 and made it to the quarterfinals. Although probably the most well-known ones was the group Stephanie's Child, which was comprised of Jan from Season 12, Rosé from Season 13, and Laguna Blue. During their appearance on America's Got Talent, Simon Cowell would end up critiquing them, saying that they couldn't really sing, as it sounded more like they were screaming rather than hitting high notes. Poor Jan can never catch a break.
He just doesn't get it, and that's okay. He's gonna get it one day.
Anyway, shows like America's Got Talent are notorious for never really treating drag queens with a lot of respect when it comes to judging their art. So because of this, Fifi would end up wanting to go somewhere where her art form would truly be appreciated. And she knew she had more chances of that happening on RuPaul's Drag Race than anywhere else. Season 4 was filmed in the summer of 2011, but wouldn't air until January 2012. This was the first season to increase the cash prize to $100,000. So going into it, Fifi thought about the ways of being able to maximize her time on TV. One way of doing this was to play the antagonist role, since it tends to be the most entertaining part of reality TV shows. Plus, it would come easy to her given how cutthroat the drag communities were back in the day. Yet she would have never expected the amount of hate she would end up receiving from the fan base. To put it into perspective, throughout season 1, 2, and 3, there was some queens that got a bad edit that would end up getting them some backlash from the fans as well. Yet since the show's popularity was a lot smaller back then, it wasn't as intense as for when the series truly began to get popular, especially since most of the newer fans would only go as far back as season 4 when rewatching the older seasons. The parasocial relationship that some of these haters had with her even translated to real life with threats of acid attacks, or people showing up to her meet and greets for awkward interactions, like the person that brought and gave her a bag of dog food, which just feels like people doing too much for the sake of being shady. But how is it that it even got to this point? And what about her time on the season made her such a villain? On episode 1, after she enters the workroom and the rest of the queens join in, you can tell once the whole cast is together that the competitive energy was in the air. The two main rivalries that Fifi goes on to have on this season is against Willem and of course Sharon Needles, because as we go on to see in Untucked, Fifi was very on edge, especially against Willem, who had made a joke about how all of them, including herself, were losers for having placed safe in the first challenge, to which Fifi quickly corrects that she does not consider herself a loser. Essentially, she wasn't there to be dealing with any tomfoolery, and rightfully so. It's important to remember that at the time of competing on season 4, Fifi was only 25 years old and had been honing in on her drag career after moving to live in the city of Chicago. When we talk about her past self, it's such a stark contrast from the person that she is now. That being said, every single soundbite that we get out of Fifi is nothing short of great shady commentary that is super hard to recreate organically. What people tend to forget is that at its core, drag queens were never known as being the nice girls. They were larger than life personality that most of the time were completely obsessed with themselves and threw shade at each other, at least in terms of a stereotypical queen. 2011 is also right after the rush in trashy reality TV from the 2000s decade, where most viewers enjoyed seeing the craziest TV moments regardless if it came at the cost of someone's reputation. So you can understand why many queens in the early seasons went in there with absolutely no filter. After surviving the first week, the second episode brought us one of the most infamous challenges, which was the wrestling matches where the queens were put into 3 different groups ropes and had to choreograph a fight scene for the judges. Mind you, this was 1 year after Mimi and First had been told by Rue that drag was not a contact sport. Essentially, times were changing and they were changing fast. Fifi ends up working with LaShawn Beyond, Kenya Michaels, and Latrice Royale, displaying a lot of nerve, especially since she takes on the leadership role for the challenge. You can really tell in these early episodes through her interactions with other queens that Fifi is one of those individuals that really gets into the heat of the moment. And how could you not when there's $100,000 on the line? When getting ready for the arena, Fifi decides to play a sort of Barbie doll type of girl, wearing a blonde wig, something that Willem was already taking a mental note of in case she needed to call her out for it in the future. Once their skit starts, we see Fifi and LaShawn in what looks like a slightly different version of the ladies' room that we'd go on to see in the Lip Sync Assassin format seasons. Considering that the other two groups ended up using the interior illusion lounges, I like that they just randomly had the set sitting around for no reason at all. The runway category for the week was girly girl attire, a very general enough prompt that made sense since most of the queens at this point were just picking outfits from their existing closets rather than getting custom garments. What I like about Fifi's runway showcase on season 4 is that it's a perfect time capsule of a style of drag that is so different from what she'd go on to deliver in the future. At this point though, she was still into the classic style of drag, with big hair and common silhouettes that you'd see many pageant queens using. Yet with that, one of the judges goes on to tell her that the way she does her makeup and the outfits she picks makes her look a lot older than she really is. So she should focus on trying to showcase herself in a more youthful way. Aside from that, they loved what she did in the wrestling match, so she was called safe, while her teammate LaShawn got negative critiques and then eliminated. What I consider the real birth of the Fifi versus Sharon beef happens on episode 3. Why? Because this is the first time that they're put together to work in a group challenge. Her group this time consists of her, Jiggly Caliente, Latrice Royale, Dieter Ritz, and Sharon Needles. They needed to make an infomercial promoting an album filled with Rue's music. As the clear leader of the group, Fifi points out that it would be better if each of the queens honed in on an entirely different character, and assigned Sharon the role of a goth queen, to which Sharon took issue with because she didn't want to do goth since that was basically her whole brand, fearing that the judges would read her for always delivering the same thing. Despite this, she went forward with playing the role that Fifi had suggested she do. Yet, when we get to the main stage, Fifi ends up being called safe, leaving behind her teammates that landed either in the top or bottom of the challenge, prompting Sharon to end up wrongfully assuming that she's in the bottom. So as soon as the judges get to her, Rue asks how it was like working with Fifi as the team captain, and Sharon proceeds to read her to filth, saying that she didn't bring strong leadership and assigned her a half-assed role to work with. To make things worse, Sharon ends up winning the whole challenge, while an unsuspecting Fifi sits backstage. Leading us to episode 4 with the cast being split into 2 groups for their first acting challenge. Fifi does a pretty meh job, but that's okay because she needed her energy for what was about to happen in the workroom. While getting ready for the runway, Sharon decides to go talk to Fifi about how she called her out on the main stage last week by criticizing her leadership skills in front of the judges. Naturally, Fifi was completely pissed at the situation and blows up at Sharon, because all she really did was tell Sharon to do something that she was good at, which is fair. I mean, if she hadn't gone with the goth look for the character, there's a chance the win could have gotten to one of the queens who were also doing standout performances. What's more is that the runway Fifi goes on to do for this episode is actually one of my favorite that she delivered in the season. Yes, it may be a basic white dress, but it was good for the time. Now, we all know that sometimes queens decide to manufacture drama. We saw it in All Stars 4 between Gia and Trinity, and as of recently, Plain Jane on season 16. Fifi has said that some of the fights that she had with Sharon Needles were exaggerated in front of the cameras, citing that many times they would both talk to each other behind the scenes to plan out what they would be arguing about. While that's very interesting to hear, I do have to say that the way Fifi looks and yells as she argues with Sharon seems very believable. So maybe there was some truth to the things that they would end up saying to each other. While the strategy to make good TV would help them by it becoming a key plotline that extended all the way to the season finale, it came at the expense of not just Sharon Needles being pinned as this underdog queen that had the world against her, but Fifi ended up being the bitter queen that fought with the fan favorite of the series. Plus, up until that point, we had never seen such a heated rivalry between two queens. Like, I know there's some people that say they don't enjoy drama all that much when it comes to Drag Race, but I think it's important to remember that there's a reason why they say that season 4 put the series on the map. And it's because it was a huge revelation to the amount of entertainment gold that came from putting a bunch of drag queens who are full of themselves in a reality TV competition. What's also true is that while most contestants from normal reality shows tend to just fade into obscurity after their season airs, what made Drag Race special was that it pandered to the gay community, specifically featuring drag queens who made their living performing at gay bars. So in a sense, they really did become superstars, at least in terms of gay culture. But But in that same respect, looking at how small the gay communities are, to have the general audience hate you means you'll encounter a lot of these people when attending your gigs. So I can only imagine the amount of anxiety, paranoia, and overall tension that came with that. Although the Fifi that was competing on season 4 didn't know what was coming, so she was still gonna be giving it her all to make it to the end. Looking into the Snatch Game of season 4, Fifi ends up being a part of one of the most chaotic challenge moments in history, where not only do we get a young Ross Matthews as a guest, but Fifi's Lady Gaga is something that ends up flopping. The good thing was that she was swimming in a sea of flops, with almost everyone in the bottom row doing bad, except for Chad. To make things worse, the judges didn't like her runway outfit, as it looked just like a basic drag performance look, plummeting her to the bottom 3 and narrowly escaping the bottom 2 just by a thread.
You're safe. It's very important for you to understand we're looking for the top. There's $100,000 at stake here. The world is watching. Bring your A game.
By episode 7, they are now more than halfway through the competition. With only 7 queens left, there was now a lot less room for error. The Dragazine challenge prompted each queen to create a magazine cover that fit with the theme that they were assigned. While brainstorming, Jiggly asked the other queens if she should make hers funny. But despite Chad and Latrice both telling her that it's a bad idea to take the serious route since the judges always love to laugh, Jiggly ends up taking Fifi's advice, which was that if she felt she can make a more consistent Dragazine taking a serious route, then it's better she do that than go with something she's not confident with. Now listen, we all know that Fifi would later admit that this was an entirely manipulative move, since she knew that Jiggly would be decreasing her chances of doing good by taking the serious route with her Dragazine. Which yes, was very shady, but at the same time, what she said to her wasn't entirely wrong. I mean, at the end of the day, Jiggly still had 2 other queens telling her to make it funny, so it must have just been that she felt more comfortable taking it seriously. Directly after this, Fifi walks over to Willem's stable to gossip about how she was setting Jiggly up to fail. Basically, this is TV gold. The episode ends with Jiggly getting eliminated after lip-syncing against Willem, who also didn't know most of the words. Even though Jiggly's exit was a bit tainted by her, I guess, taking Fifi's advice, they would both go on to have a very close friendship for many years after their season. Like, I'm pretty sure even to this day, they're good Judies, which speaks a lot to the difference in the person that we saw on TV versus who Fifi is when she's touring or hanging out with other queens. The climax of season 4 happens when we get to episode 8. The concept of the Frenemies challenge was to pair the remaining 6 queens with the person that they least got along with. Fifi gets Sharon, Willem gets Latrice, and Chad gets Dita, because unfortunately they were just the last ones left. Willem and Latrice end up winning, while Fifi and Sharon both land in the bottom 2 for the first time in the competition. This was a very intense lip sync because they were such contrasting performances. Fifi was relying on her dance moves and tricks, while Sharon tried to invoke a focus to her facial expressions. Yet neither Sharon nor Fifi would end up winning the lip sync, as Willem was called forward and disqualified from the competition for breaking the rules. This led fans to theorize what would have happened had Willem not ended up being disqualified. Some believe that Fifi would have gone home because Sharon was the clear frontrunner of the season. Yet queens like Bob the Drag Queen have said that she felt that Fifi provided a better performance than Sharon, even though her wig fell off.
And then also when you're watching, you're like, oh my God, Fifi just beat Sharon, and she beat Sharon in this lip sync, and Sharon's going to go home, and then RuPaul was like, actually, Willem, get the fuck out of here.
For the most part, Fifi enjoyed playing the villain while competing on season 4, as she's always found it very entertaining to have someone in a reality TV show be the one that actually makes things interesting, which I very much agree with. Yet this sentiment does not seem to reverberate with the fanbase. For example, in season 14, we got Daya Betty, who to many would be considered the villain of the season. Yet she still received a ton of backlash from the fans for the way she expressed herself on the show, with those same people getting mad when the reunion episode aired and Daya pretty much doubling down on the way she acted on season 14, citing that she was being honest with herself and the other queens over the way she was feeling in those moments that made the final edit. Regardless, if you thought that the hate that queens like Candy Muse, Daya Betty, Lux Noir London, or Q got was bad, it was nowhere near the barrage of hate that Fifi got. Yet what people couldn't take away from her was the fact that she had made it to the top 3. So going into the finale, there was a big hope within her that all the hardships she had gone through in life will have meant something if she got to win the crown. At the taping of the finale, Fifi's mom was present in the audience as a big support system, but the person missing was her father. One of the saddest parts of Fifi's life that's explored on the show was her relationship with her abusive father. Even after season 4 aired, the dad apparently still did not care about repairing his relationship with his own son that has just made it to the finale of a reality TV competition.
Does he know you've done the show?
Yeah. I know he watches it, and I know he doesn't like it.
One of the stories that Fifi shared from her past that really stuck with me was when she spoke about how when she was in middle school, she came back home only to see that her dad had found a Playboy Girl magazine which featured a bunch of naked men. The dad reacted to this by beating the crap out of a young Jaremi Carey. In another occasion, Jaremi ended up getting beat up so bad by her dad that she was sent to the hospital on her own birthday. But it seems that they've been able to somewhat repair their relationship, with Jaremi stating in an interview from around 2016 that her dad ended up reaching out and sent paragraphs through an email apologizing for his past mistakes. Although it doesn't change the fact that within what should have been one of the biggest celebrations of Jaremi's career as Fifi O'Hara, not everyone in her family were cheering her on. The filming of the finale in general must have been a hard day for her, especially considering that by this point most of the season had already aired, and the negative reception from people was made very clear online. If anything, she knew that she wasn't gonna win. But worst of all, there was really no precedent, at least with Drag Race, for the amount of people that were so upset with the way a queen acted in the competition. In a sense, she was sort of alone in regards to her experience, and would serve as a backdrop for what future queens should expect if they end up being the villains of their seasons too. When it came to who was gonna get the season 4 crown, everyone pretty much knew that Sharon was gonna win. After all, it was between Sharon, who was the underdog, Fifi, who was the villain, and Chad Michaels, who was the professional. It's also been said that since season 4 was the first finale to film alternate crownings, that the first queen to be crowned was Chad Michaels, who was not aware that all 3 queens would be getting crowned. So apparently, after Chad thought she won, they then informed her that they would also be filming Sharon and Fifi. Whether or not that's true, it would be a pretty brutal moment to have. I mean, imagine being poor Chad. So obviously, after season 4 finished airing, the relationship between the queens continued to evolve. What's become an ongoing theme even within modern seasons is that if you and another queen didn't get along in the competition, then no matter what you do, people will always think that you still have beef with each other. Even with Roxy, who is currently competing on All Stars 9, had to remind fans that her and Jinx are friends now, and that something that happened over a decade ago doesn't dictate their friendship with each other now. Therefore, the road ahead for Fifi was gonna be rough, but there was still hope that things would change. If you didn't know, Fifi was originally meant to compete on All Stars 1, but had to drop out last minute due to not being able to pass her background check, basically dodging a bullet. But as a consequence, it's theorized that this is why Willem, who was also cast on All Stars 1, was then told he was shortlisted and would not be participating because she had no storyline. Yet I can't help but wonder how All Stars 1 would have turned out if Fifi and Willem would have actually made the final cast. Maybe Fifi would have actually gotten a redemption edit, or they would have both been the first eliminated queens. Obviously we'll never know, but it's interesting to think about. It's also speculated that Mimi First and Tammy Brown were then able to get cast after Fifi and Willem were shortlisted. Speaking of being shortlisted, Fifi was also supposed to be on Drag U, but for similar reasons she was not able to film the episode, and was then replaced with Willem. The reason for Fifi not passing her background check is presumably because she had a DUI that she never ended up taking care of. But it came to bite her when she was traveling from Canada back to the States, and ended up getting detained upon arriving at the airport and sent to jail, where she'd stay for a whole month. Not many people remember this, but there was a video that she uploaded to her YouTube channel where she spoke about her whole experience, titled 30 Days in Jail. But it seems that she ended up taking it down, which makes sense because I remember despite her telling the story in a very vulnerable way, most of the comment section was filled with hate by people saying that she deserved it for how she acted on season 4. Fifi actually went on to talk about her time in jail too during one of her walkthroughs with RuPaul when they were filming All Stars 2, but it never made the final cut. Although that brings us to one of the best moments in her career. On January 1st, 2016, Fifi O'Hara would rebrand to Jaremi Carey and embark on one of her most iconic projects ever made, titled 365 Days of Drag, which would play a pivotal role in the resurgence of her drag career. Every single day of the year, Jaremi would upload a new photo of a different drag look or cosplay. This was a really bold promise to make, so it was no surprise that the series would end up going viral. The expectations of what new look Jaremi was gonna do was so intriguing, and a blessing to people's timelines. While I don't have official numbers, it goes without saying that with a full year of high quality and extremely diverse displays of her artistry, it was no wonder that her Instagram would begin to skyrocket in followers. A fun fact about this series is that at one point, Jaremi began to fall behind in keeping up with a new upload every day, which resulted sometimes in having to do like 5 looks in a single day in order to catch up. Keep in mind that the year 2016, while Jaremi had already filmed All Stars 2 in the summer of 2015, it wouldn't go on to start airing until August of 2016. So in a way, this was setting the groundwork for her eventual reintroduction to the fanbase. The reason Jaremi started the 365 Days of Drag project was because while she was touring, she got into an argument with another Drag Race queen. But at one point, that queen told her, quote, "Let's see who people believe because I have more followers than you." While there's many theories on who the queen was, what we do know is that she had a World of Wonder YouTube series. So Jaremi wanted to prove that she could grow her career without the help of World of Wonder catering a series to her. Thus, the 365 Days of Drag project was born, something that highlighted her work ethic and determination better than anything she had done before. As a quick side note, I think it would be cool to resurface what is essentially hundreds of elevated artistic looks. So once you're done this video, make sure to go check out the 365 Days of Drag project that's available on Just Jaremi's Instagram. And share a couple of your favorites with your friends or even just on Twitter to hopefully introduce more people to it. In fact, Jaremi put so much thought into this series that there was some weeks of the year dedicated to certain themes such as 90s TV shows or video game characters. I remember as this was happening, after a whole year of doing a project that many thought she wasn't going to be able to fulfill, her final look was uploaded on January 1st, 2017, which showed Fifi in a dress comprised of every one of her 365 Days of Drag looks. Jaremi currently still has all these looks on her Instagram at Just Jaremi. You'll just have to scroll for a minute or two until you get to her 2016 feed. In October 2019, Jaremi would end up doing an unofficial continuation of the 365 Days of Drag, with 31 Days of Wizardry, featuring a different character from Harry Potter every day. You could tell how much her makeup abilities had improved in the 3 years since her last series, which is saying a lot given that the skills were always there. The 31 Days of Wizardry originally ended as Jaremi cosplaying as J.K. Rowling, but months later in 2020, J.K. Rowling would start making transphobic statements that she would keep on doubling down as the year went on, something that was super offensive to the trans community. After it became clear that J.K. Rowling was super bigoted, Jaremi would end up deleting her cosplay of J.K. Rowling and sent the message to the fanbase that she fully stands with the trans community. To this day, J.K. Rowling continues to go after trans people, so Jaremi made the right decision. Now, if we fast forward 4 years after season 4, good old Fifi O'Hara would return to compete on All Stars 2, which aired in August 2016. This was gonna be her moment of redemption. It would mean that the worst villain in Drag Race history returned to the show to provide a different side of her persona. At least that's what she thought was gonna happen. The truth is, by the time Fifi came back for All Stars 2, her drag had done a complete 180 shift. She went from being a queen constrained by a rulebook of pageant showgirl drag to a more conceptualized approach to her art form. The All Stars 2 cast was actually comprised of a set of super successful queens, and that's not to take away anything from other All-Star casts. But not only was this mostly filled with frontrunners, but they were also queens who had been touring non-stop all over the world since their season aired. Basically, they were way different queens than we had seen before, an evolution that we don't usually see that much in the newer All-Star seasons. Even Katya, who had only 1 year between the filming of season 7 and All Stars 2, came back so improved. Each one of these queens truly had a shot at potentially winning the crown. As you can probably tell, Jaremi has had many different name changes throughout her life. Starters, her original drag name was actually Phoenix O'Hara, but during the casting process for season 4, producers told Jaremi that since the year prior a contestant named Phoenix had competed on season 3, that perhaps she should change her drag name for the show. And so, Jaremi would ultimately decide to change her drag name from Phoenix O'Hara to Fifi O'Hara. Subsequently, her final name change would come when she reverted back to Jaremi Carey, the artist behind the character of Fifi. As you're probably already thinking, most fans were not on board with the way Jaremi seemed to be marketing her career. After all, it was difficult for many people to suddenly have to refer to Fifi by a different name, or be able to understand the fact that deep down, these celebrity drag queens are actually just artists trying to express themselves. Jeremi's also said many times that while she prefers to be referred to as Jaremi, she doesn't mind it too much when people call her Fifi, because at the end of the day, it's the character that gained her notoriety. Yet looking back, it's really funny how many people were mad at the thought of changing the way they referred to Jaremi. I mean, we'd go on to have queens like Sonique, who came back with an even fuller name as Kylie Sonique Love. And to this day, it's pretty normal for there to be the occasional queen that tells fans after the season has aired that she wants to be referred to by a new name. But this was one of the first times where a queen was making a really bold stance that was super unapologetic in delivery, yet she'd have a really rocky road ahead of her. Throughout the press tour of All Stars 2, the fanbase's perception of Jaremi was not off to a great start when she began to show up to red carpet events out of drag. To many, it felt like she was just actively trying to stir the pot. Yet Jaremi explains that she wanted to make a statement by showing up out of drag to showcase herself as the artist behind the character. Keep in mind that she was still in the middle of the 365 Days of Drag project, so it makes sense that she wanted a break. During the initial casting of the season, producers told Fifi that she should come back so they could give her the redemption storyline that she's always wanted. If you didn't know, many of the people that work at World of Wonder have hung out with some of the queens outside of the show as the years go by, because it's easy to just run into them considering Drag Race is filmed in Los Angeles, where there's a thriving drag community. Despite what seemed like a promise of redemption, while filming confessionals for the season, producers kept insisting to Fifi to change up some of the wording of her answers, which she took as an immediate red flag since it became obvious that they wanted more shady sound bites from her. From what we saw, it seems that she must have cooperated very well with the story producers, because once again we were blessed with some really good shady sound bites from her in what turned into one, if not the most drama-filled season. Yet her road to the realization that there would be no redemption for Fifi O'Hara started on All Stars 2 episode 1. It stated that Fifi is the 4th queen to enter the All Stars 2 workroom, in what I consider one of the best entrance outfits of all time. Now hear me out, maybe this isn't the most extravagant scene we've seen someone wear for their entrance, but it's not just that the look is styled to perfection from head to toe, it's the level of detailing with the amount of rhinestones, the careful placement of the purple question mark is so intricate to the point that accessories like the shoes and hat had time put into it to make sure that it would fit everything cohesively, making what was just a Riddler inspired look become much more than that and its own thing altogether. Out of the whole cast, both Fifi and Roxy had really similar stories with their original season, so it made sense that each of them wanted to change the way that they came across to viewers. Regardless, for the talent show, she decided to do an a cappella version to one of her own songs, subsequently resulting in a performance that was really hard to watch, since not only was she off key in some parts, but you couldn't really hear a consistent rhythm. Fifi says that she realized things were going to be different this time around after Adore Delano had gotten completely bathed in negative critiques, so it was clear that it was going to be a challenging experience. The first elimination round of All Stars 2 was super intense just for the fact that it had never been done before. The idea of someone going home based on a queen choosing their lipstick rather than losing a lip sync was baffling, but also really intriguing. I remember while watching being worried for Fifi that things were going to play out similar to what happened to Mimi on First, who went there wanting to redeem herself but ended up going home on the first episode. While deliberating in the workroom, the idea to have each of the top 2 queens speak to the eliminated girl one-on-one was apparently Roxy's idea, who was a fan of Survivor and saw them do it there. So production took note of it and implemented it moving forward. When Fifi does her one-on-one with Roxy, she wastes no time in saying that based on the judges' critiques, she doesn't think she was the worst, because Adore got the harshest critiques with Coco coming in second. You really do feel the emotion through the screen. The thought of a bottom 3 on the first episode of All Stars being comprised of 2 runner-ups and 1 queen that made it to the top 5 of her season made it all the more suspenseful. While waiting to go back on the main stage, apparently Adore was considering quitting right there, but it was Fifi who talked her through it and told her to stay because she deserved her spot in the competition. A moment that would have been super cool to see in the final edit, showing a more compassionate side to Fifi's persona. So then Roxy wins the lip sync and reveals that she chose to eliminate her season 5 sister Coco Montrese, meaning Fifi had managed to make it to 1 more episode. This would then be pretty much the only time that Fifi got to enjoy an episode that aired, because by next week we would begin to see red flags about her new edit on Drag Race. The airing of episode 2 was the first sign that things were about to go off the rails in terms of Fifi's relationship with World of Wonder. Shortly after Adore Delano quits and the girls are getting ready to go film Snatch Game, we're shown Fifi talking to both Alyssa and Roxy on the couch, when all of a sudden Fifi tells Alyssa that she thinks her Joan Crawford impersonation is too similar to Alyssa's own personality. My favorite part about this is that right after telling Alyssa that she hopes she didn't offend her by saying that, she proceeds to just say it again.
I don't want you like offended by what I said.
I'm not offended.
Okay, I'm just saying like you sounded like Alyssa.
Then, in what seems like just seconds after, Fifi tells Roxy that she's really worried about her impersonation of Sofia Vergara, because her Spanish accent needs to be way thicker so it can be funny, resulting in Roxy changing her character to Alaska, which of course flops. Meanwhile, Fifi, who chose to play Teresa Caputo, actually manages to redeem herself from the Lady Gaga Snatch Game on season 4. While it wasn't one of my favorites, it was a decent enough performance that earned her a good showcase from what she delivered last time. Going into All Stars 2, she only had 7 days to prepare because at the time she got the call, she was on vacation. And I say that because when it comes to this runway, which was the first official one of the season, it was sort of disappointing to see her interpretation of the theme latex as just the bathing suit. I mean, you sort of see that there was somewhat of a concept with all the ducks around her neck and on her wrist, but even the judges call her out for it. On the bright side though, she got a bunch of praise for her Snatch Game character. Something that I only found out while making research for this video is that the infamous shade tree from season 8 was actually used again on All Stars 2, with producers asking some of the queens to go into the shade tree to vent about random stuff. Naturally, most of the cast didn't feel like going in there, and All Stars 2 would end up retracting the concept altogether. For the Herstory of the World challenge, Fifi gets assigned Helen of Troy, aka the face that launched 1,000 ships. Here's where things start to get even worse, because we're shown a confessional of Fifi talking about how while Alyssa is a funny queen, she's more worried about creating moments that she can make t-shirts out of, rather than applying herself to the competition. Then later on, we're shown Fifi telling Ginger that she's super worried for her performance because she's gonna be wearing a huge dress, which is followed by Ginger's confessional where she says something that stuck out to me. It was, quote, "I think Fifi came into the competition with certain notions about what she needed to do to redeem her reputation from her original season, and what she needed to do to make sure she was gonna last long, and that both those things don't necessarily mesh well with one another." Pointing out that to her, sometimes it feels that Fifi can go out of her way to plant seeds of doubt in other queens, to ruffle some feathers in order to throw them off their game. This observation by Ginger does bring the question, could it be that Fifi's energy in the competition came as a defense mechanism to try to survive as long as she could on the season? Or was it just a byproduct of her not being aware that she was sometimes throwing people off their game with her opinion? When it came to the Herstory of the World challenge, Fifi does a really good job with her part in the Rusical, to the point where I thought she was going to be in the top 2. Because I mean, she went on to eat up the Future of Drag runway, a look that she actually made while she was in her hotel room, with the big gun being comprised of empty pizza boxes, Gatorade bottles, and spray paint, which is super impressive as well as a great representation of her creativity. That brings us to one of the most iconic pieces of drama from All Stars 2, which was when Fifi said during a Roscoe's viewing party that on episode 3, the edit showed Alyssa receiving a positive critique from the judges, yet Fifi stated that the critique had actually been given to Detox, and that the editors were just trying to favor Alyssa more. This of course would be talked about online, especially on Reddit, but it only took a couple days for the ultimate twist to happen, when World of Wonder randomly released the uncut version of the critiques for that episode, which showed that Detox had in fact received a critique that was shown in the final edit, and that Fifi had lied about the show editing critiques for other queens. This might have been a misunderstanding from Fifi's side, but the story in itself is Drag Race lore that just needs to live on forever. In regards to the episode, the bottom 2 ends up being Katya and Ginger Minj, with Detox choosing Katya's lipstick and Alyssa winning the lip sync and choosing Ginger's, a pivotal moment on the season. By the time we get to All Stars 2 episode 4, Fifi calls out Alyssa for going against the agreement that the group had supposedly made and eliminating someone who didn't get the worst critiques out of the bottom 2. Yet she wasn't the only one that thought Alyssa's decision was shady. Roxy Andrews expresses many times that it did kind of throw the queens into a loop since they thought that they were going by critiques. But thank the gay gods that Alyssa did what she did, because imagine having Katya sashay away in that moment. The 6 remaining queens are divided into pairs for the acting challenge, with Fifi ending up with Roxy Andrews. Their drag movie sequel is called Show Squirrels, based on the classic Showgirls movie. Originally, Roxy was going to play the role of the mother, while Fifi was going to be the young showgirl. But as a last minute decision, they would end up switching roles. A blessing in disguise, at least in terms of Fifi's performance, whose acting challenge is one of the moments that show sometimes just because a queen did bad on a certain type of challenge on their original season, that they can still surprise you if they do it again. Out of the 2, Fifi stole the scene and did it with such ease. In fact, the whole episode was a really good showcase for her. The runway theme was 2-in-1s, and she had easily the best outfit of the night next to Roxy Andrews, because the way both of the looks are entirely different from each other, the way she presented it, and the fact that she made it herself is just the chef's kiss. The top 2 for the episode is announced to be Alaska and Fifi O'Hara. After the queens head to the workroom to deliberate, Fifi says that her decision is going to be based on what she considers to be the fairest thing to do. Along with that, she says that she doesn't want to do one-on-ones with the queens in the bottom, because her decision has already been made up. I mean, you had to be crazy if you didn't know that Fifi was going to be picking Alyssa's lipstick, because in Fifi's mind, Alyssa was just picking lipsticks with 0 criteria. So that would mean that she'd be in danger of going home herself if her faith was ever in Alyssa's hands. Although Detox says in a confessional that she found it rude of Fifi to reject having one-on-ones with the queens in the bottom, even though Tatiana rejected it too on episode 1. Regardless, the time comes for Fifi and Alaska to lip sync to Got to Be Real by Cheryl Lynn. The outfit change that Fifi did into this purple sleek look just made her stand out in such a good way on that stage, making it the best decision a queen's made made in regards to the look they changed into for their top 2 performance. That being said, Alaska would end up winning the lip sync despite some fans thinking that Fifi embodied the song. Plus, it would have been a lot more impactful to have Alyssa Edwards be eliminated by the quote villain of the season. But I guess Rue just loved seeing Little Pound Cake more. After episode 4 aired, in real life, Jaremi had a breakdown in her hotel room where she locked herself in the bathroom and began to cry as the episode she wanted challenge would end up reinforcing her villain storyline. So she knew that once again, she became the villain. And the same thing that happened to her on season 4 was now repeating itself with the new and much bigger fanbase of Drag Race. There must have been a lot going through her head. I mean, the rushes of regret for giving them material to work with, the anger that story producers lied to her about wanting to give her a redemption, and mostly it was all the hard work that she had been doing with the 365 Days of Drag project that could have potentially been in vain, as the fan base at that point had seemed to be turning a new leaf with how they treated her. But with the airing of All Stars 2, they ended up reverting back to their old ways, but even worse than before. Unfortunately for her, there would still be one more week of her being on TV. All Stars 2 episode 5, aka The Revenge of the Queens, is considered to be the best episode in all of Drag Race history, entirely because of the amount of layers surrounding it. After Alyssa's elimination, when the queens head back to talk about what transpired, Fifi points out something that was kind of true, which was that sometimes the judges would excuse Alyssa's bad runways entirely because of her having a really charismatic personality. Specifically, Carson tells Alyssa that her 2-in-1 look wasn't really that much of a 2-in-1, and while the concept was cool, it wasn't executed well, but that none of it mattered because he just gets happy whenever he sees Alyssa move or talk. The twist to have the queens appear on the mirror right after Fifi had been going off on how the judges were giving Alyssa special treatment was nothing short of amazing. Given that this was a huge gag, Fifi's stress must have been at an all-time high because you can really tell in her face just how angry she is about the situation. After all the eliminated queens walk in with very questionable 2-in-1 looks, Alyssa tells Fifi that she was never being fake to anyone and was upfront with every single queen about the problems that she had with people, or that Fifi had never told her about the issues she was having with the judges' favoritism towards her. This was an organic climax of the season that I think not even producers could have predicted how heated things were going to get. The next day, we find out that they have to do a stand-up challenge, where the eliminated queens get to choose which of the competing queens they'd like to be paired with. Coco's the last one to pick, having the options of either Roxy or Fifi. But despite having years of friendship with Roxy, she chose to go with Fifi entirely out of spite, given that Roxy had eliminated Coco in episode 1. It always makes me wonder what would have happened had Fifi gotten to work alone, but something tells me that the outcome would have been the same. Oddly enough, while the queens are brainstorming, Fifi walks over to Alyssa to talk about the argument that they had earlier, ending in a hug between the two, which, whether or not it was genuine, it did come across as Fifi realizing what viewers were going to think about her, and that it was in her best interest to try to mend her relationship with Alyssa in front of the cameras. Coco and Fifi's stand-up routine consisted of them both playing the roles of street hookers working at night. While Coco, I guess, looked okay, Fifi chose to emphasize her character by dressing up in a really tacky way and talking with a thick accent. It was overall just a huge miss in terms of what the challenge was, and if anything, they would have had more chances of success if they had just written a normal stand-up routine. Needless to say, RuPaul announces that the top 2 is Alaska and Detox's paired, meaning that their partners, Alyssa and Tatiana, were going to lip sync for the chance to return to the competition. On the other hand, Fifi and Roxy are placed in the bottom 2. Keep in mind that by this point, it was Roxy's 3rd time in the bottom, while Fifi had just been in the top the week prior, and this was her first time up for elimination. In the workroom, Fifi tells the group that she doesn't want to beg people to stay, and says it again during her one-on-one with Alyssa, adding that Alyssa should be looking at her track record as the deciding factor. Unfortunately, after both Alyssa and Tatiana win the lip sync, they reveal that both of them have chosen to eliminate Fifi O'Hara, officially ending the Drag Race trajectory of one of the most iconic contestants to ever bless us with their presence in the competition. Not just that, but she gave us a dramatic exit. Fifi rejecting the hug from Alyssa is one of my favorite Drag Race moments ever, because it just took so much nerve and was the most genuine manifestation of what anger looks like when emanating from a person. Like, at that point, Fifi was over it and she just wanted to go home. While Alyssa gives up on the hug, Tatiana seemingly marches down the stage as if she was about to beat the crap out of her, but she actually just gives her a hug. When discussing further about the producers of World of Wonder, Jaremi has repeatedly referred to them as bullies that go out of their way to bring down queens, mentioning how her producer from the show took one of her best friends out for lunch, presumably Jiggly Caliente, and told Jiggly that she should stop being friends with Fifi O'Hara because she's worse than Willem, which is pretty suspicious, but as an audience, we tend to forget that the producers of the show is filled with a lot of messy gays, so this comes as no surprise. Moving on, All Stars 2 would go on to become the only All Star season to have a reunion episode. However, Fifi decided not to attended due to not wanting to give producers even more content to use against her. It was pretty disappointing when I heard she wouldn't be attending. After all, from a fan perspective, you sort of wanted Fifi to be there so that there would be more drama in the episode, especially considering she was one of the main storylines from the entire season. Essentially, not attending it was Fifi's way of taking control of the situation. Plus, she knew that if she did go to the reunion, she'd end up just blowing up and getting a worse edit. All that being said, as the person behind the art, Jaremi acknowledges that without RuPaul's Drag Race, she wouldn't have gotten many of the great opportunities that were given to her, but that in a sense, she had to build her own platform from scratch, given that her time on Drag Race was filled with negativity. So she had to change people's perception of her without the help of World of Wonder, which can be very difficult. Furthermore, it makes sense that she would want to cut ties with something that defined her late 20s and early 30s, causing a lot of turmoil in rebuilding her life. On another note, while All Stars 2 was airing, Jaremi would release her first single along with a music video titled Play. It was a really cute put together video that I remember playing for a while at the time it came out. Despite this, her music career wouldn't really last very long, with only a couple more additional music videos being released later that year. Looking back, Jaremi's biggest wish for All Stars 2 would have been that production focused more on showcasing the talents of the queens rather than drama, or at least to have shown that Fifi had been getting along with other cast members from the season. What this means is that Fifi was born in the wrong generation because she would have loved competing in a format like All Stars 9, that is quite literally about celebrating queens' talents. One of Jaremi's greatest accomplishments is something that I feel deserves more recognition. But first, let me provide some context. In 2017, Hurricane Maria would hit many populated cities of Puerto Rico. This would cause a humanitarian crisis which left thousands of people without a home, vital resources, and nowhere to go. To make matters worse, Hurricane Maria would cause the worst electrical blackout in US history, with thousands being left without access to electricity for several months. The Trump administration at the time placed a lot of restrictions on the amount of help that was being funded to Puerto Rico, which only exacerbated the crisis. Subsequently, during this time period, there was a lot of efforts made by the public to try to raise money for those affected by the destruction of the hurricane. In November 2017, Jaremi decided to organize a benefit show where all the money raised would be sent to those affected by the hurricane. To do this, she took it upon herself to gather the help of dozens of Ru girls from the show. The benefit event was titled Queens United and featured queens like Bob the Drag Queen, Katya, Chad Michaels, Ginger Minj, and so many more. Together, they would end up raising a total of $80,000, which is pretty impressive. I mean, that's the equivalent of BB winning season 1 5 times. Now, Jaremi has elaborated many times about how she considers World of Wonder to be a company of bullies. It seems that this statement is based mostly on the way that she was edited for both season 4 and All Stars 2. At the end of the day, World of Wonder is first and foremost a production company that is creating a reality TV competition show that has been getting more popular with every year that goes by. Their interest will never be the well-being or longevity of a contestant's career. It's gonna be to absolve each contestant of good resources that can be transformed into good content for the episode. That being said, the real problem is the loud portion of the fanbase that takes it upon themselves to harass queens online, affecting their mental health. But unfortunately, even to this day, that hasn't changed. However, a funny part about Jaremi's relationship to World of Wonder is that apparently during the height of her going off on All Stars 2 on Twitter, World of Wonder reached out to Jaremi saying they'd pay her a certain amount of money if she stopped speaking negatively about the show. Maybe it was the $10,000 that she should have gotten for the Got to Be Real lip sync. After the airing of All Stars 2, Jaremi would go on to focus more on her career as a Twitch streamer. She still provides us with great looks every now and then, but tends to fall mostly under the radar. Jaremi has also been actively involved in politics, even becoming the co-chair of Drag Out the Vote, which was a non-profit organization that aimed to spread awareness to the importance of participating in democracy through the art form of drag. Currently, Jaremi is still doing very well as a Twitch streamer, which isn't a surprise since she's always been open about her love for video games. So if you're into gaming, I strongly recommend you go check her out. Not just that, but make sure you go follow her Instagram and Twitter at JustJaremi, and thank her for all that she's given us throughout her legacy, even though she'll most likely never set foot on Drag Race again. I mean, it's 2024 and she is still a high demand contestant. Even just last year, we found out that the producers of a new reality show competition called House of Villains, which gathers some of the most villainous contestants of different reality shows and puts them together to live in the house and vote people out, ended up reaching out to Jaremi to offer her a spot in the house. But she would end up rejecting the offer because she didn't want to put herself in a situation where she would crack under the pressure. Which honestly, kudos for doing that, Jaremi, for spilling. No matter how many years go by, Fifi O'Hara was the first Drag Race queen to truly deal with the wrath of the fans, becoming the ultimate villain of the show's franchise. In terms of legacy, the show encapsulated what's honestly some really good television, yet there is so much more to the artist of Jaremi Carey than her shady moments on the show. We saw in this video how there was aspects about her personality that we didn't get to see on the series, and instead we'd see it through the actions that she would do by giving back to her community or subverting her expectations with her level of talent, even with the way she got to connect and gain support from so many Ru girls in her years in the spotlight. I hope that new fans of the series that watch the season for the first time, and even if they come out of it with a sour taste in their mouth with Fifi's storylines, that they're able to laugh it off as the entertainment gold that it was and will continue to be for decades to come.
Thanks again to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. Make sure to click the link in the description and use code GREENGAY for a whole 20% off your order.
I want to take a moment to thank my patrons. In the Elite Pink Squad, we have Matthew Burns, Gay Uncle, Poppers Alberta, Sari Tish, Natasha De Leon, Las Potitas, and Cool Gal Nan. Up next, we have the Green Squad with Azure, Cayman Rider Furry, Edgar Allan Pup, IJS, Not a Punch But a Keek, Jack Beck, Aaron W, Captain Chaos, Bashir with the Good Beard, Galeria Gomez, Dea, and Sarah G. If you'd like to see your name on the screen, you can support me on Patreon. The link will be in the description. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We are almost at 100K. And I can't wait to get there. I'm so happy to have been able to remake this video. I feel much prouder of it now that I feel much prouder about it now that it's a lot more detailed and it's at the quality that I wanted it to be. Also, make sure to follow me on Twitter at GreenGayYT and my TikTok, and follow my TikTok and Instagram at It's Green Gay. I'll see you guys next time.